The interstellar spaceship Avalon travels silently through space, heading toward the distant colony world Homestead 2. Inside, every corridor is empty. The ship runs entirely on autopilot while its 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers remain in deep hibernation. Suddenly, Avalon passes through an asteroid belt. The shields begin to weaken as the system diverts all power to the main barrier, but one massive asteroid still breaks through and slams into the ship. The collision causes multiple malfunctions before the vessel's automated systems begin self-repairs. Amidst these errors, one of the hibernation pods unexpectedly activates, awakening Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. The pod opens, and an automated system welcomes him, explaining that he has spent 120 years in suspended animation and that the ship is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. It instructs him about his ID band, personal cabin, and onboard facilities he can enjoy before arrival. Excited but nervous to meet others, Jim gets ready and steps into an orientation class. But the holographic instructor lectures to an empty room, explaining that Earth has become overpopulated, overpriced, and overrated. When Jim asks why no one else is there, the hologram ignores him. Realizing it can't respond, he leaves to find anyone awake. He walks through the vast concourse, but it's completely deserted. At an automated help desk, he requests to speak to a real person. The system directs him to a steward, but no one's there either. Growing desperate, he asks to see the captain. When he reaches the bridge, it's locked, and through the glass, he sees that none of the main crew are awake. Eventually, Jim finds the ship's observatory and is horrified to discover the truth. The Avalon is still 90 years away from Homestead 2. He realizes he's woken up far too early. Panicking, he rushes back to the concourse and sends a message to Earth, begging for help since he doesn't know how to return to hibernation. But the computer tells him it will take 55 years to receive a reply. Devastated, Jim wanders aimlessly until he finds the ship's bar and, finally, another face. He begins talking to the bartender, only to realize the man is actually an android named Arthur. Jim tries to explain his situation, but even Arthur doesn't fully understand how this could happen. Days pass. Jim wakes up in his cabin and visits the canteen, where he learns that most items are reserved for gold-class passengers. Stuck with plain coffee, he tries fixing his pod himself. After hours of work, he climbs inside, but nothing happens. He even attempts to access the crew's hibernation chamber, but it's sealed off. As small glitches spread through the ship, Jim returns to Arthur again and again, drinking, venting, and slowly losing hope. The android encourages him to enjoy the ship's luxuries, so Jim breaks into a gold-class suite. He eats at fancy restaurants, plays games, and explores the entertainment areas, but the loneliness only deepens. One night, drunk and broken, he wanders into the airlock and finds spacesuits for spacewalks. Jim suits up, opens the airlock, and steps outside. Floating in the vast silence, he gazes at the stars, the only conscious human alive in that endless moment. When he returns inside, he removes his helmet and hesitates by the airlock once more, ready to end it all. But at the last second, he changes his mind, runs back in, and slips on a bottle. As he stands up, his eyes catch a glimpse of a woman inside one of the pods, Aurora Lane. Intrigued, he searches the database and listens to her passenger interviews. She's a writer, intelligent, and full of life. Captivated, Jim starts spending time near her pod, reading her work and listening to her voice. He even discusses her with Arthur, admitting he's found the perfect woman but can never meet her. As months pass, the loneliness drives him to an impossible thought. What if he wakes her up? He debates it with Arthur, but the android can't grasp the moral dilemma. If he wakes Aurora, she'll be trapped on the ship forever, just like him. Jim fights the urge, but can't let go of the idea. Finally, he gives in. He overrides the system and activates her pod. As Aurora awakens, going through the same process he once did, Jim hides and returns to his cabin. Later, he meets her in the concourse, pretending to have just discovered her awake. She's confused, terrified, and desperate to get back into hibernation, but Jim explains that there's no way. The ship doesn't have equipment to re-enter stasis, meaning they're both stranded for life. Aurora is heartbroken. Jim tells her to rest and adjusts to her presence, while guilt quietly eats away at him. He asks Arthur never to tell her the truth. The next day, Aurora wakes up and begins investigating, asking the info desk about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her, and they share breakfast. She learns he's been eating the same basic meal for over a year and surprises him by ordering from the gold-class menu. Aurora refuses to give up and searches every section of the ship, the infirmary, research labs, even the crew's sealed quarters, hoping for a solution. Meanwhile, minor malfunctions continue. Aurora writes, runs, and swims, trying to stay sane. She interviews Jim about his past, learning that he left Earth hoping to start a new life, to finally be somebody. Later, in the observatory, she reveals her dream. She wasn't just emigrating. Aurora had a round-trip ticket. She planned to spend a year on Homestead 2, then return to Earth to write the greatest story ever told, becoming the first journalist to journey between worlds. Eventually, she stops fighting reality, and Jim tries to cheer her up. He takes her dancing, to the movies, even to play basketball, finally introducing her to Arthur at the bar. For a moment, she smiles again until the weight of their situation returns. Jim stays behind, tormented by guilt. Later, Aurora enters the observatory to find a small replica of the Chrysler Building, a gift he built for her, hoping to make her smile again. Sometime later, Jim and Aurora go on a date at the bar. They share dinner and open up about their pasts. Aurora reveals that her father died when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim takes her to the airlock, where they both suit up for a spacewalk. Floating side by side among the stars, Jim finally has someone to share that breathtaking view with. Back inside, the two kiss and end up in Jim's cabin, where they spend the night together. Soon, they start living as a couple. Aurora moves into his room, and they fall into a routine, eating, jogging, exploring, and sleeping together. During his wanderings, Jim discovers the ship's hydroponics bay and brings Aurora fresh flowers. One day, as the Avalon passes near a red giant star, they watch its fiery glow from the observatory. Later, they celebrate Aurora's birthday in a luxurious restaurant and then at the bar. While Jim steps away to prepare a handmade ring for her, Aurora chats with Arthur. Unaware of the secret, the android accidentally tells her that Jim was the one who woke her up. Shocked and horrified, Aurora confronts Jim when he returns. She's furious, screaming that he stole her life, and runs away. From that moment on, she avoids him completely. Jim tries to speak to her, even over the ship's comm system, but she refuses to listen. He admits that he fell in love with her, but for Aurora, the betrayal is unforgivable. One night, the ship suffers another major malfunction. Systems begin shutting down, and soon the elevator jams while Jim is inside. Aurora notices more strange errors, including a food dispenser breakdown and a small tree Jim planted in the concourse. Suddenly, a new voice echoes through the comms, Deck Chief Gus Mancuso, asking who planted the tree. Rushing to the concourse, they meet Gus, who has just woken from his pod. The three discuss what happened, and he's baffled that 3 pods malfunctioned. He takes them to the bridge and confirms that something is seriously wrong with the ship. They'll have to inspect every system manually. While collecting data, a maintenance robot nearly crashes down beside them, another sign of the ship's failing systems. Gus shows them how to scan the ship, and later, as Jim joins him at the pods, the deck chief discovers the truth about Aurora's awakening. Disappointed, he tells Jim what he did was unforgivable. Soon after, Gus begins to feel weak and coughs up blood, a sign of hibernation sickness. Aurora finds him later on the bridge, barely holding on. Despite their efforts, the infirmary can't treat his condition. Before dying, Gus gives Jim his ID bracelet and tells them to save the ship. Moments later, he passes away. Suddenly, alarms blare and the Avalon shakes violently. Jim and Aurora rush to engineering, but another gravity failure hits, followed by an error in Arthur's system, forcing Jim to deactivate the android. They finally reach the power plant and find a massive breach caused by the asteroid impact years ago. When they open a hatch, the suction pulls both of them toward space. Jim barely manages to close it, sealing the hull and saving them. But the damage is worse than they thought. The meteor had struck the reactor control computer. They replaced the damaged part, but the automatic venting system fails. Jim realizes he'll have to manually vent the reactor from outside. He suits up and gives Aurora Gus's bracelet, knowing he might not survive. Inside the reactor room, the temperature rises to critical levels. A loose bolt strikes Aurora's arm as she struggles to keep the system stable. Outside, Jim reaches the vent door but discovers it won't stay open on its own. The only way to cool the reactor is for him to hold it open manually. Aurora pleads with him not to do it, but he insists if they don't save the ship, everyone aboard will die. She vents the reactor, and the cooling process works. But the explosion from the released gases blows Jim away, snapping his tether. His oxygen pressure plummets as Aurora races to rescue him. She suits up, launches into space, and barely manages to grab his broken tether, pulling him back inside. Dragging him to the infirmary, Aurora finds that Jim has no pulse. Desperate, she uses Gus's bracelet to override the medical pod and revive him. The pod automatically performs resuscitation, and against all odds, Jim comes back to life. Aurora breaks down in relief and forgives him. Together, they repair Arthur and give Gus a proper space burial. Later, Jim takes Aurora to the infirmary and reveals that he's figured out how to modify the medical pod into a hibernation chamber. He tells her to use it, to finish the journey asleep, and live her life when they arrive. But Aurora chooses to stay awake with him. In time, Jim proposes, and they spend the rest of their lives together aboard the Avalon, the only two souls awake in the endless silence of space. 88 years later, the crew finally awakens at Homestead 2. To their amazement, they find the ship transformed, lush with plants, trees, and signs of life everywhere. Aurora has left them a message, telling the story of the life she and Jim built while everyone else was sleeping. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.